Great. Thank you, Georg, and good morning, everyone. Shannon first as ever to the chat, filling our day with sparkles of our being. That's what we like. Thank you, Shannon. It's actually the end of my day here, but and Paula's as well, because she's over in Greece at the moment. Kurt says there's no sound. I guess that's hopefully just for him. Can you hear me okay, Paula? Yeah, good. Okay. So, Kurt, I think that must be your end. Morning, Kathleen. So, the last day of our Science and Consciousness week, and it's been a great week actually. And it's I was looking through the list of people, speakers, and contributors coming to the event in November, and we could do like another 2 or 3 weeks of this if we wanted to. But this is just a taster, and hopefully we'll be seeing a few of you over at the beautiful Broughton Sanctuary in November. But in the meantime, we're very lucky to have Paula with us today. And you may remember that the theme of Science and Consciousness this year in the UK is weird time. So weird being the old Anglo-Saxon Viking Celtic term for the interconnected web that generates all life, in which things are not as linear as they are in our material world. And the impulse came out of last year's conference to explore this question of time, because so many of us were witnessing anomalies, let's say, in the linear time phenomena. Particularly every year at Science and Consciousness, we do a remote viewing experiment together. And every year we try it the way they did it at Princeton, which is the way they found to actually be most effective. And that is the partner who is receiving the information is asked to try to pick up what is being sent to them half an hour before the sender has even decided what they're going to send. And every time there are hits in the room. So, again and again, we see that the linearity of time doesn't seem to play a role when we're working at the level of consciousness. So digging into that and exploring what are we discovering about that, and how does that dimension of time relate to this linear dimension of time that we're in here. And Paula, with her experience in the shamanic work, I think has a few interesting things to say about that. So I've got to know Paula, who's come to Chartres, Ubiquity Chartres Academy, regularly, which is certainly a place somehow beyond time. You come there and you get an instant upgrade, particularly when you walk the labyrinth. We have this lovely evening where we get the cathedral to ourselves, and we are able to walk the labyrinth with medieval music and candlelight, and it certainly puts you in another dimension. And so, Paula, great to have you with us. And I think the best thing is for you to kind of kick us off with some of your thoughts, and then we'll take it into a dialogue and see what questions come out of the chat, and go for as long as there is energy.
Wonderful. Okay, welcome. So many people here in the chat room, how I know and recognize from Chartres primarily, right, is the great meeting place, and now we have the meeting place in Broughton as well. Last year was just amazing to be at the conference. Today I'm going to talk about this whole idea of time, looking at it from the point of view of really all of a question for everyone. One, the big question, I feel like it's the question of the conference perhaps, and the question of this week is does the secret of time really hold an important key to the unfolding of our destiny as a species? And we're going to be looking at that question today. By looking at the construct around mastery of time versus being a slave of time. And I was cautioning myself to use the word slave because I know it has a lot of connotation that can be very triggering. So we really want to put slave in this construct of an archetype. Yeah, and we'll look at that and define what that is as well. So are we slaves of time? Are we slaves to time? So let's look at what constitutes slavery, right? So there's a lack of personal freedom. The control and authority are outside of self. There's a lot of coercion, lack of consent, bought, sold, owned by others. So we may not be conscious that we're owned by others. We may not feel that we're owned by others, but rather the question in addition is, are there others that feel that they own us and can buy and sell our personal property and so forth without consent and a lot of coercion, for example? And then that leaves us into being very vulnerable to abuse and exploitation. The punishment for disobedience is all part of slavery. So let's see. Why don't my slides move? I'll move them that way. Okay, so we look at evidence. So is there evidence that in fact we are slaves of time? So we know we want things instantaneous. We want answers right away. Technology is evident. Good research shows that we last about 6 minutes without checking into one of these social media platforms, which are all about time, right? And then if we're in a deep flow, we last maybe 20 minutes before we're a flow of thinking and deep concentration, we last 20 minutes. What happened with COVID, right? We blurred home and work boundaries, which really means that the demands of time are prominent like all the time. Traffic, I lived in South Florida. Maybe some of you live in those big city areas where everyone's fighting to get there first, or beating their own clock, or beating the clock to get somewhere, and road rage being part of that. So doing anything in order to kind of in the race against time. Social comparisons on media, a race against time to keep up. And we're going to think about that in a minute regarding the youth. But what is happening on social media is there is a time element, and where people feel that they have missed out on something in comparison to someone else. And then some of the root of that is our materialistic world consciousness right now that's so prevalent. So we're in this need of acquiring more and more, by definition, means that we're living in this place of scarcity and lack, including time. FOMA is an actual now acronym, the fear of missing out. So this manipulation that's wanting for purposes of selling something, right? This bargaining of something, selling something. We're running out of time to get it. Now, if you buy a ticket or book a hotel room or something, your countdown on the is there, right? You have 2 more minutes. You have this many minutes, right? Now it's gone, or there's only 1 room left, so you have just minutes to be able to acquire it. So there's the fear of that. I changed my buying habits after reading the abstract in the first few pages of a dissertation by a student, University of Miami, in the field of advertising, because I realized what was being done to me, but how many do? So the illusion of life as time limited is kind of squeezed in there, right? But in very large font, because I put it that way for this reason. It was talked about earlier this week. Steve Taylor talked about the fact that we bookend life maybe too much, right? With birth and death. And it's creating this illusion that life is limited in and of itself, and that death is always stalking us. And I believe it has, we'll talk more about it, it has a huge impact on us, very much from a shamanic perspective as well, but the eternal perspective, yet it's underground. It's hidden from us, the fact that we have this view of life. Time moves like an arrow, linear, and our future is always in the grips of the past in this point of view. So we've moved let's say from the Genome Project. I was at the University of Miami in the medical school in the 90s and early 2000s. And the Genome Project birthed, right? And there were people there working on the project. We had continual updates. But it's done to us, I think, in this linear perspective of time, that now we're fated with our DNA, right? It's done a lot of good things as well, but there's kind of this fated piece to it that I'm carrying with me, all of this information and that is alive in me, that could potentially do damage to me, cause health concerns, if not now, in the future, and stalk me. And with life being linear, rather than circling back on itself, and the ability to do that, to heal the past, it has had, I believe, a additional kind of negative effect on us. Time is money. It was brought up yesterday as well. We have some good themes going throughout the week. It was Benjamin Franklin in the 1740s, in giving advice to a young tradesman, went into quite a dialogue with him, maybe one-way dialogue, in talking about time, and really landed on the essence of the adage of time is money. So efficiency counts, and it's important. And if you've done it this way, you've wasted time and you've also wasted money. So when we look at that, we have to ask, what else could time be if we weren't in this construct of this consciousness of consumerism and materialism? So again, with energy, we know that where attention goes, energy flows. So where is more attention and energy needed? So we have it so much going in this one direction. Where is it not flowing? Right? So could time be relationships? Could time be friendships? Could it be love? Could it be art? What if time were defined as just beauty? And we put attention to creating that. Or time is harmony, because there is an element of time in harmony, right? To create it, to live it, to be in it. Yeah. What would be different? So we come back to the question of, I live in the end looking at the chat and hearing from people. Are we returning to this construct of slavery, of this archetype, right? The river flows forward and then it loops back on itself, and we pull past, right? We pull in the things that we have not learned yet from. They keep showing up for us. And have we learned from this or not? Or are we back into that archetype of slavery? So is there lack of personal freedom? Something that happened to me, maybe it wouldn't freak out anybody out. I didn't freak out, but I was surprised in terms of this control, authority outside, lack of consent. I just 4 days ago, I was celebrating. I called a friend from high school to wish him happy birthday. And in our conversations, we of course revisited the past, and somebody that was my neighbor in 1971, we brought up his name. And then my friend mentioned that he had reached out to him on Facebook, and something about Facebook friends, and this friend's name was mentioned on a cell phone call, not through my computer, and the next day, this person that I have not heard of, seen in any way, much thought of since 1971, sends me a Facebook friend request. Yeah. So how much are we being bought and sold and owned by others and manipulated? When I look at the last two bullet points, comes to mind for me. I've spoken a lot about this on Humanity Rising within Ubiquity, on the youth. And the youth remain very vulnerable to abuse and exploitation, right? They don't have the years, the wisdom that come with age. Neither do they have the full brain development. The social media we know around youth and so forth, not to belabor today. But the punishment for disobedience, what came to my mind is the high rise, extremely rise in girls globally with inflicting harm on themselves. And it questions, have we embodied, right? Have we taken on the oppressor? Have we joined the oppressor in that punishment and that self-abuse? And girls particularly, we know that anger, frustration is directed inward and not outward, particularly vulnerable, returning to slavery. But now we have this beautiful slide, right? It's like, oh my gosh, there's another world out there, right? Another possibility. And I know probably everybody on this call is living in this world. But for us to see the contrast, so the importance of looking at time because of the contrast. And the question of how do we become masters of time? And the answer comes in this unification, with our true nature. And seeing this river of time here, and understanding from this week that all of time, everything that's happening is happening all at the same time in that river of time. And the shamanic view of time in being able to reach back in time and to heal the past and to change present time and future time, but also knowing that it's all collapsed in the now. I want to read something that I found so beautiful from Robin Wall Kimmerman's book, The Democracy of Species. Her latest book, Braiding a Sweetgrass, is beautiful. And it was 2 years ago, maybe now 3, the required reading for all incoming NYU students. So we see this reemergence now of a different understanding of time. So these are my thoughts, and then I'll read from the book, very short. While skimming through the Potawatomi dictionary, Robin Wall discovers the verb to be a Saturday and becomes completely exasperated, saying, everyone knows that Saturday is a noun, not a verb. But then her finger rests on the word Mama, to be a bay. And then she begins to think, but that's ridiculous. How are you a bay? How can you be a bay? And then in her investigation of her native language, she finds that her native language, 70% of the words are nouns, and 70% are, 70% in the English language are nouns, but in her native language are verbs. So think about a bay now in this way. A bay is a noun only if water is dead. When a bay is a noun, it's defined by humans trapped between its shores and contained by the word. But the verb, to be a bay, releases the water from the bondage and lets it to live free. To be a bay holds the wonder that for this moment, the living water has decided to shelter itself between these shores, conversing with cedar roots and a flock of baby mercansers. Because it could do otherwise, it could become a stream or an ocean or a waterfall, and there are verbs for that too. To be a hill, to be a sandy beach, to be a Saturday. All are possible verbs in a world where everything is alive. Water, land, and even a day. The language, a mirror for seeing the animacy of the world. The life that pulses through all things, through all pines and nuthatches and mushrooms. This is the language I hear in the woods. This is the language that speaks to us. of what wells up all around us. Yes, breaking free of time and thinking about how our language defines time for us. And being a master of time is this unifying, when we're unified with nature. So we ask, well, who were the masters of time? We think of, I love art. So it's like, who are the art masters? Like, bring up the recall and the memory. And everyone, right? And going back to Peter's work on the stages, right? The evolution of time, the different word, the spiraling, right? Evolution of time. In those early phases, this web of life, this interconnectedness of life really was everyone. And so we were in that phase, we recognized that we were sentient beings. And we lived like that because we were so close to nature. We couldn't miss it, right? The communication amongst all beings was so alive. And that comes the term, all relations, the two-legged, the four-legged, the winged, the fin, the furred, the feathered, the whales, the dolphins, right? So all of relations, Gaia and all relations, and in that place of commune and self-honoring, mutual respect. So we can also look at time as it relates to animism then, right? Projecting onto the animal kingdom in which we were in harmony with perceptions of time, and also reflecting and look at how those projections represented their own perception of time. So we have the phoenix from Greek mythology, a nature, the cyclical nature of life and death, rebirth, symbolizing that passage of time. The eagle, the condor as well, that clear vision, that perspective, wingtip to wingtip with spirit, with high above being able to see into the future, that idea of precognition, linking to time. I'm here in Greece, actually, and thinking about the harmony with needing to yoke the and bring into harmony and balance of being such a primary theme in the highest time of Greek civilization. And I think of the turtle, very honored here as well, as being that measured perception of time, of taking time slow has its importance. The cicada, when I arrived here in Athens in July, it was 114 degrees. Any tree I got close to became very loud. It was a mystery to me. But it was the cicadas, and they're very loud, and it's a wonderful sound. But they expel their heat with that sound. They're getting rid of the heat on their bodies, so they're very loud. But when you get to the mystery is when you get close to the tree, there's no sound at all. So it took me a little bit of figuring that out and finding them in the tree. They're quite hidden. But they come up underground. So again, it's that symbol of rebirth and renewal, very different than an arrow in time that has a finite ending. We see it with the dragon in the Chinese culture, the Ouroboros circling back in time, the internal nature of time, the continuity of time. In Egypt, the scarab beetle, the daily rhythm of time as well, the rising and setting of the sun. We can think of our own circadian rhythm. And it's so great if we would go to bed when the sun goes down and get up with the sunrise. And maybe some of you here do that. I'm closer to getting up at the sunrise than I'm going to bed at sunset. But in that circadian rhythm, we know in that rhythm with the earth, our whole body, all the hormones that are released and so forth are also in rhythm, are at their best. So it's the cyclical nature and being in rhythm with it, with our bodies. A favorite of mine, the jaguar has come to mean a lot to me. So it's, wow, I guess so. Because when death stalks us, and I think that's, sorry, I recently had a landmark birthday, and I really had to pause because I felt like death was stalking me. So I'm taking a pause to figure out what that means. And here we are talking about time, synchronicities. Peter, there you have one. But in South America, cultures, the jaguar is that sense of fearlessness, right? So that death doesn't stalk you. If you can be freed up from that, right? So when you think of the initiations that shamans go through, medicine men and women, called by all different names throughout time, right? But the initiations are a lot about overcoming that fear of death. I mean, if you're buried in the ground with only your head up for 3 days, right? It's in one purpose of that is that death no longer stalks you. So you can walk in the impeccability of fearlessness. And that is all time and space related. The jaguar takes you over the rainbow bridge and in this place of time and space where you can dwell in this place also of infinity, where you lose track of time and space as you're in this of no time. Yeah. And the serpent, another one of snakes representing the shedding of the past. And being able to circle back on our past and really change it in meaningful ways as a shamanic practice is, and to embrace the future in a new way. So it's all time related and all happening in the now. So this is where I was just a couple of weeks ago. So I put together these slides and listening again to Peter yesterday on his evolution of time made so much sense to me now. I kind of like, wow, I have so enjoyed being here and experiencing things that I've learned about primarily through Humanity Rising, through ubiquity since COVID. Yes, maybe many of us here started with COVID. And Delphi really speaks about time in this ways. One, the stone on the left is this is Delphi. You'll see the reconstruction of it as if it really was in a second. But the stone on the left, it's a huge kind of monolith sitting by itself. And that's Gaia. And on this mountain, 2 meters high plus, sat Gaia before Delphi. And people pilgrimaged there for Mother Earth. And the oracle, the sitting in there and receiving that wisdom from the mother, always happened there. But with the separation of from self and represented in the city-states that were formed all throughout Greece into beyond north of Turkey, modern day, and in the southern part of Italy, all of that came a different representation of the oracle, different means to kind of access the oracle, beginning to maybe create people who were then specialized in the oracle, moving away from everybody to some people. Here you see in the middle image is the entrance into Delphi. And when you would enter there, up above would be Know Thyself, and the other is of modulation, everything in the moderate, like in harmony and balance, not too much excess. Yeah. And then underneath was this amazing temple, and you would go down and you would be purified first. And part of that purification, there was a thin wall, and you would do a confession the priests and priestesses that were there. Those who came were primarily men, if not all of them. They were rulers and others in political positions all throughout those kingdoms, coming right here to the navel, to the center of the earth, was considered Delphi. And a beautiful egg that's inside the museum that you pulsate when you're around it, representing that center. And then you would enter into the hall where you would receive your guidance from Apollo. And they were the Pythia, the mediums, if we want to use that word, it doesn't feel quite right, but the mediums, the translator from the messenger, were women. And that was their task. Many other things happened at Delphi. I didn't realize athletes came from all over and trained in this high altitude. So there's a whole stadium. There's a theater there at Delphi. So the whole harmony of coming into harmony, into self, represented here at Delphi was seeking that wisdom, that higher wisdom, tapping into that higher consciousness, into the invisible, accessed at that time through the Pythia. The serpent, the python, was also the primary power animal, you would say, of Delphi. There was a theater where 15,000 people could sit, because the arts were part of coming into that place of harmony with self and everything in balance. It was a yoking. And this is my interpretation. So I'd love a discussion on it. But with the separation of self and the city-states, and the amount of conflict and wars and battles and all of that going on at that time in history, the need to come to have a mythology and the arts, and also the Olympics, because I'm not here today in my slides, but I went to Olympia, is the need to bring into harness the male energy. So when you go to Olympia and see where the Olympics, not that far from Delphi, they're all males that traveled there, and they traveled there in safety. There was no wars, no allowance of any type of violence. And so the yoking of the body and the beauty of the body, of course, the males performed, competed in the nude. That was the harmonic body. And then you have the concept, I want to put this forward too, in terms of time and space, of the centurions, which was the blending of the horse and man, and needing to control the instinctual. And how did you do that? When you come out of the cyclical, harmonic state of the feminine, of Gaia, with the male patriarch arising, and the separation of self and separation to some degree from nature, you needed, they created mechanisms in which to harness that instinctual. And Delphi was one of those places. Know thyself. It was because the shadow, if you were coming there to get consult on a decision around war, know thyself was important, because what was held in your shadow was going to get you in your way in battle, right? And in modulation was always to kind of do no harm, but it's hard to understand that when you read about how much conflict there was. But it was the teaching, and it feels very part of this evolution of from feminine to the patriarch, and the designated women that were the messengers were able to deliver the message that Apollo had. I show the image. This is the port. People came by sea. The Corinthian port is there. So imagine what it took to get to Delphi, to get the wisdom that you were seeking. So we can imagine that the wisdom given was useful, right? Like, it's not calling a psychic on a phone, right? And sitting in your bathrobe at night thinking or whatever, right? No, this is what it took to have this entire experience, right? Beyond the wisdom. So we know that it just adds credibility to the fact that there really was a channeling of information that then people really felt valuable. So this is Delphi in all of its glory. And the stone down here below on the far left, you can barely see. So will we break free of time? Will we break free? Are we able once again to discern the prophecy of time to come, the dangers and the opportunities collectively? Move in harmony with time. Look at time in terms of its malleability, its flexibility, and returning to timelessness, that we're never born and will never die. It's really a question now, but it's a belief that was held back in time. And circling back in time to heal our past wounds, retrieving soul parts is really that part of that shamanic work. The Tao says to fix things before they're born. We're born in time, right? In the infinity, again, the dreaming the world into being, in the infinity before they're born in time, in the finite. So what kind of world are we dreaming into being? I love being, part of ubiquity, part of humanity rising, because here we come into consciously and knowing that we're consciously dreaming this world into being. And does the science of time hold a key? Meaning that as that mystery of the science of time unfolds and we better and better understand it, and we can relate it, will it make a significant difference in our evolution at this time, again, time where it feels that we're in a crossroad or at a Y, that many people sense that it's an unknown which direction it's going to go. And I just offered this, it came to me in a quiet state of a container. And if we put all of the kind of the mystery schools that are present today and all the individuals that are really working to raise the vibration and have committed their lives, their time, their energy to make this happen, right? And if we put that into a container, my sense, a question for the group, is that the container is contained. And too much to a degree, we're singing to the choir, right? But the edges of this container, if you think of it as a barrel, I'm seeing it as a barrel, kind of breaking out and want to expand further and maybe break into that river of time. But what's needed, and that's our question, right? So, in coming to this, I really feel that what's needed is this blending of the science and the knowing of the science that people listen to, like who's outside of the circle, right? Along with what we know, in all the energy that's created and built up to make this happen. And then a new language, a new representation of what we know will emerge through a doorway. And I think these conversations, are the doorways of what that language and constructs and descriptions need to look like. For the confines. Yeah, of the barrel, right? It's very confined. Maybe I'm describing myself, right? Projecting ourselves into the story. But we're contained, and we need to break into that river with this wisdom and knowledge and truth that we're trying to discover at the same time. And these are the Kiro, the tradition I was trained in. And on the far right is a beautiful despacho, everything from nature. And where it's buried in all of that are many, many people's prayers coming in the form of 3 cocoa leaves and placed inside of this beautiful despacho, wrapped up in a gift wrap and burnt in fire, right? And so the prayers going up to the heavens. And so we know that all of our thoughts and prayers and are always landing into the infinite and creating new possibilities.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you, Paula. Lots of appreciation in the chat for both the content and the way you brought it. So thank you for that.
Yeah. No. Look forward to reading them all. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Well, let's jump to
at a different time. Yes.
A lot of them have been comments, but there's a question here from Cuss who says, can you share your views about the relationship between choice in the now and the connection to time and what I call probable realities that get physically manifested? Humbly, I attempted to address this issue in a writing called The Power of Yes and No. There's the link to it. So the relationship between choice in the moment, the connection to time and probable realities. So if there's a, like in the field, if there's probabilities of certain things manifesting, one hand, and at the other hand, in each moment, we're making a choice. Yeah. How do you see the relationship? That's an interesting one. How do you see the relationship between those? Yeah.
Well, I'm put into the quandary of making a decision, right? A choice would seem to be a conversation about a decision, like what I'm going to choose, right? I think when we're connected well into ourselves, we can sense into and feel into that probability, and then the conscious awareness, see, it becomes all around our personal work and the degree to which we're aware of our own shadows and how much shadow work we've done, right? Because if we haven't done a lot of shadow work, regardless, our choices are limited because we keep repeating our shadow, right? What's held in our shadow keeps informing our future and our moments. So I think doing the shadow work, releasing us from those imprints, meaning, as well as connecting up into the invisible, where we're sensing into time, space. We see the probabilities of something. Maybe we do something actually to prevent something, right? Mm-hmm. Instead of deciding A or B, maybe it's sensing into something that could, maybe many people have had those, right? Like I've had them. Wow, that's going to happen. Let me not do that, right? So the choice again is that sensing into that what's present in time. If that's helpful. Yeah, Peter, did you? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the way I'm making sense of it is, so if we're sensing into the field, we're feeling the probabilities starting to crystallize, as it were, but that doesn't mean we have to follow it, right? It's about what I hear you saying is we sense that, and then we sense into, and right now at this moment, what feels like, the best step for me to take now in that context, which doesn't have to be kind of going with the flow of the probabilities. It could be a conscious choice to do something different. But like you say, it's ultimately about that ability to sense what's in the field, to sense what's in us, and to be as free as possible in that sensing, which means, of course, doing our own work so that whatever we sense is as unfiltered, as clear as possible, as opposed to being filtered by the conditioning. So maybe that'll help Cuff in his reflections. Okay, I'm being pointed to a comment, a question back at 8:44. I can't go back that far. Oh, I see. 8:44. I see that was a different 8:44 because it's 17:44 here. So yeah. So Linda asked, can you speak to actually physically stepping out of time? Now, I guess in your shamanic work, you've had some experience of that. Linda says, I've done this a number of times.
Yes.
Stepping out of time.
But as being, I'm trained in the shamanic energy medicine practice, right? I never call myself, of course, a shaman. They are, well, I don't know how to say it other than I feel it would be an insult to, to the tradition itself, right? When the modern, there's no way, right? Read the, we can't step into that. We can't see the world through those eyes, but we can be trained and come into harmony with self and do that work. So the question, and I sidetracked, was stepping out of time. So that is what the shamanic practice is being in service to individuals and to a community, right, is the shaman's way. And to best do that, we need to leave ordinary time. So we learn how to leave ordinary time with sound. You know, for my tradition with the Kiro and from Peru, the sound is more of a rattle than a drum. And the rattle's beat and the rhythm is that of Mother Earth. It's 7.8 hertz. Drumming is the same. So we come into resonance with the mother and into the invisible field. And then we begin to see what is there. And that reality is always very different than the finite reality. So anything is possible. It's the unexpected happens, but we go in service to that individual to be shown. Ask and you shall receive is biblical, right? Matthew 14, right? And that's the truth of that. So you will have a practice where it's the same ritual. You're informing your psyche. We're now going to leave ordinary time and space. So don't panic. We'll come back, but don't panic, right? So you may put on think of all the traditions and the rituals and things in preparation, the incenses, maybe it's sage, maybe it's frankincense, right? You look into the priests and coming along with the copal in Mexico is all in service to leaving this ordinary time. And then what you receive are messages for an individual healing. Then you're reading the auric field that exists within the infinite. So it's the luminous energy field of the individual where their past is held. And then a lot more to say about that. But that's how it's ritual and ceremony that takes us out of. And that's what was used by the indigenous to reset the autonomic nervous system, if we can think of it that way, right? Was ritual and ceremony, sound. So it moves us when we're into fight or flight. The reset of the autonomic is coming back into flow, coming back into rhythm. And what we look at what stimulates, for example, the vagus nerve. I did a lot of work. I'm teaching a course now on that, is all of these ancient practices, right? Because it resets us. So we need to reset. That is to be in harmony with self, out of fight or flight, and to be able to connect.
Yeah. Reminds me of when a teacher once said to me, you can't necessarily do anything about what's going on around you, but you can choose how to relate to it. So it's
Yeah.
not about the stuff that's happening, it's about the nature of our relationship to it. And there was some chat earlier about everything seems to be moving so fast around us, etc. Well, that can be the case, but we also have the choice of how to relate to it, right? So if we can find that space, I don't know whether it's stepping out of time or not, but that space where we're still in ourselves, then all the stuff can be happening, whatever, around us, but we don't get sucked into it, as it were. And then as it's kind of speeding around, as it were, we get to see the essence of it. We get to see the patterns in what is happening, rather than, it's like being in the eye of the storm, rather than the moment you try to reach into the storm, you just get sucked up in it. So how you're able to stay in that kind of center line while it's all going on around us. Is that stepping out of time and space? I'm not sure, but it certainly changes the nature of our relationship to what's happening anyway.
Right, absolutely.
Let me see, there's somebody earlier, I don't want to miss, Ji Yun, you said, our daughter, do you mean that? Our daughter shared choices are singular embodied actions despite mind as capable of multiple realities. I'm not quite sure I understand that, Ji Yun, I'm afraid. Can you speak to that as stepping out of time inquiries? Our shared choices are singular embodied actions despite... Maybe you can clarify that a bit further down, Ji Yun, because I'm afraid I don't grok that one. The galaxy is contributing here. Is it helpful to think about the past more as a parallel to our now? That events, or inverted commas, my past lives are happening concurrently, which is kind of what Caleb was suggesting yesterday. How do you make sense of that?
Well, I've in my work and with individuals, we've definitely stepped back into past lives, and not on purpose. Thinking that they're happening simultaneous. I don't know if it shifts my perception of time and space, and thinking about it that way. It would explain that in this river of time, we can see it, feel it, sense it, know it, because it's in the river of time, which has everything in it. And that makes sense. As I had, the interesting thing when falling back in time, it always began with, look at your shoes, your feet. And the person constructed this story looking very different. It could have been everything, different gender, different time frame for sure, what she wore, or he, mostly I work with women. But when the dynamic unfolded, it was a perfect overlay to the dynamic that we were attempting to solve by releasing energy and moving it on the field that she had come in to solve. Over and over again, that would happen. I think it's real that we've had past lives.
One of the ways I make sense of it is if it's all information, right, which everybody's saying, it's just that what's in the material world is like denser information. That's what's, say, in the subtle world. The past would be, let's say, more fixed patterns in the information field. If everything that happens is recorded in the Akashic field, or whatever we want to call it.
Yeah.
What has actually taken place in the material world would leave like a denser pattern behind than, let's say, a probability of something that might happen in the future. And I know that from my work with the eco-intention, where we work with the energetic, systems of large scale things like organizations and pieces of land, if you try to go back in time to do something, it's kind of harder work than if you go into the future to do something, because somehow the pattern in the past is more fixed than the pattern in the future. And I remember there's something that Ken says, Ken Wilber, it's one of his beginning of, I can't remember, it's one of the tenets he talks about, and he talks about possibility and probability, that the lower defines the possibilities and the higher defines the probabilities. And I wonder if that somehow relates to this time thing, that, you know, the past is influencing the possibilities and the future is more about the probabilities. And that reflects this kind of sense of, well, it's all information. There's the present now, and then there are denser patterns because they've been through the kind of embodied experience, as it were, and then there are subtler patterns which are yet to form and manifest in the, but they would all be accessible and here, like right now, because everything is. You see what I mean? I
love it. Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah. By probabilities, we have a sense of, it's not so much form by definition of the term probability, right? And then the heavy form of the past, and it's informing the future. Absolutely. I mean, the present time. So when people coming in and can do that deep work into releasing that energies from the past, right? When we do the work and work with stones, and we ask the stone that's put on the particular chakra to release it from the energy vortexes, right? Just to release it easier. We ask, and Jaguar helps track, right? Is to go back in time, go as far back in time, so that we go all the way upstream. So it's not in this lifetime. We go back in terms of the imprint that we're trying to release. So it's it makes makes sense that,
you know, I made a note. The question I wrote down while you were talking was, why have we become slaves of time? And of course you ask a question and you immediately get an answer, and the answer I got was, well, it's related to our fear of dying.
Oh, I love it. Yes.
Right, isn't that kind of the essence of it, right? I mean, why are we so obsessed with time? And it reminds me of a book I read when I was doing my PhD, which is, and I can't remember the title, it's something about white clouds. Somebody will probably put it in the chat. It was beautiful, about, you know, it had stuff about reincarnation and things in it. And there was this lovely sentence. It was when I was still very much kind of, we're going to change the world and we need to do it now. And it said, if you have a mission, you know, or a passion that you're trying to achieve, and it's really held in your heart, if you don't manage it this lifetime, you know, you will in a future lifetime. It was kind of a big relief of, oh, thank goodness, you know, I don't have to complete the work this lifetime, but it can happen in another one. And it's amazing the kind of pressure it takes off somehow, that when we, you know, we have this story about, well, it all ends. And when you take that away, and I've been reading the Book of Spirits recently, which is, can't remember the guy's name, but there's a Netflix documentary about it. It was in France, where they went round, where they were levitating tables and stuff in the cafes in Paris, and 1800s somethings. And what they did is they went and talked to loads of mediums and psychics and stuff, and asked them all the same questions. So all these people who were apparently channeling entities, asked them all the same, like, what is God? What happens when we die? You know, loads of questions. And of course, basically got the same answer every time, which was pretty interesting. So you can ask yourself, well, were they just actually using a second person form to be able to access, you know, the universal intelligence, or was it really an entity and they all have the same answer anyway? But they then put all those into a book called the Book of Spirits, which is like the kind of collection of answers that they got from these mediums. And they talk quite normally about, you know, you have this physical experience and then the journey of the spirit, and what the relationship is between the spirit's learning and journey and the journey of the individual when they're incarnated. And I notice when that becomes a norm, our whole relationship to time, and, you know, needing to get things done, or being attached to things, or, you know, it just, everything kind of simplifies, and it helps me, you know, become a lot more present with what is now, because, well, there isn't really anything else, you know. And then if we're not worried about achieving what we need to achieve this lifetime, then that kind of radically changes our experience of the present moment. I think. The way of the white clouds. Thank you, Chari. Yes, that was it. The way of the white clouds. That was it.
Way of the white clouds.
Yeah. Angela, I feel if we did not have this time limit, we would not have the same push or urgency to achieve. Yeah, and this, this Western obsession built into our economic systems for a never-ending growth, right? It always has to be more, and more. And that seems to me intrinsically tied into that, because once we take out the time thing, then there's always enough, then it's kind of, because it's what's here now. There's not this kind of obsession to move to the next. That's what it is, isn't it? It's like an obsession to move to the next, to build more. It's never enough. Growth has to continue, which puts us instantly in a experience of lack in the present, right? Or it's not good, and it's never good enough, because it always needs to be better, and it always needs to be more. And so we're always looking beyond where we are now to try to, grow more, get more of this, have more of that, or whatever.
There's a construct.
So isn't it?
Yeah, I love that. There's a construct, I can't remember his name, maybe somebody will know in the chat, that distinguishes between dreamer mode, achievement mode, and flow mode. And we could be in flow mode, which is a different definition of time, and then achieve what we want to achieve, but in the flow state, which is in this form of, you have to reset, you have to be out of this fight or flight by definition, right? Like in a calm state, but you are in flow with self, with time, with pressures. You're doing what is inspiring, or you've come into right relationship with that. And the Kira, it's Aini, coming into right relationship. And then you work in this flow state. Achievement state is all about competition, is what you had just described. But we're competing against ourselves, as well as everyone else in that state. I think the amount of information and the overload of information without discerning minds, meaning people not having a framework in which to organize their thinking, their life, and is missing. Yeah.
Nobody's saying there isn't such a thing as linear time, or like we were saying yesterday with Kaylin and Krista, you've got that linear time experience, and then you've got the non-linear, and it's in the subtle, as it were, the non-physical, that the non-linear dimension exists, and in the physical it's the linear. And we chose to incarnate, all of us, to be here in this manifest world, so it's kind of how we play between the two. And Michael brings up an important point, which is this idea of cycles, these big cycles that have been part of the traditions for a long time. He's talking about the ultimately pre-Vedic, he says, sense of these ages, the gold age, and then the yuga, the Kali yuga, the current age with violence and incomprehension, but ultimately which is going to cycle around or reconnect back into this gold age, not back at the same place, but I would say reconnecting to the archetype of that, in the next embodiment of it, as it were. So it's really, it comes back to this sense I had earlier, is it's so much about not is linear good, is non-linear good, or anything else. It's about the fact they both coexist, and that's the non-dual position, right? But it's about how we choose to relate to them. So how we choose to relate to the fact that there is this linear dimension, and how we choose to relate to the fact that there is this non-linear dimension. And as Kaylin and Krista were talking about, how we navigate between the two. How do we coexist, right? In the practices you were describing as well.
Yeah.
How do we coexist?
Yeah.
Being kind of plugged into the non-linear and being, engaged in the linear at the same time. And, Ken talks a lot about this when he says, we've often, in the evolutionary spirituality, often got into this idea that we have to transcend everything, right? It's like the material is the worst that there is, the body, emotions, everything else, it's all bad, and we need to transcend it into the absolute. But he's like, well, that's not a very non-dual perspective, right? So it's the integration of the absolute and the relative that is the definition of the non-dual. And there is a stream that seems to think, we need to deny all of the relative and the linear and everything else, and kind of get out of here. Well, we're here, right? We're here for some kind of reason. So how we occupy that non-dual position of holding the fact that both exist, the absolute and the relative, the linear and the non-linear, and how we play in both realms and experience what happens when we do start to connect them. It actually reminds me of
I think it's
what?
I'm sorry, Peter, I interrupted.
Sorry, no, but I was going on too long anyway. But I'll just share this funny story from a guy I was learning geomancy with, a guy called Richard Leviton. So he thinks about entities like angels and gnomes and things like that. And so we walk around the landscape experiencing them. But he says the deal is humans kind of are the bridge between angelic realm and the elemental realm, because the angelic energy is way too higher frequency, right, for the elementals to pick up and transmute immediately. So he says, the energy of an angel would fry the arse off a gnome. He says, right? So so the human's job is to kind of step it down, as it were, to be that bridge between frequencies and bring the kind of cosmic energy into the earth, and then connect the earth energy into the cosmos, which may be why we've ended up being vertical beings. I don't know, yes. But it's like the navigation of these two worlds. There's something critical there, I think.
Yeah, no, that's and that we think of the term embodiment, right? So I wonder if that could be applied here as well, right? And this embodiment is that when it is that convergence, right, of holding the earth energy, and as well as the angelic. We're connected, but we're in our bodies, and we're the term embodied, comes to mind with that. The other thing that we haven't mentioned but is real is just the dark forces that live within that other realm. And so from a shamanic perspective, it's not just the angelic, right? Everything is in this invisible as well. And then the susceptibility that people have who to those dark forces coming in and living within the body is also real. Like the spirit possession, right? The Catholic Church's exorcism, right? Is also a real part of that reality. Yeah.
Lots of great comments. It's funny that Ursula Le Guin keeps coming back for me, and my parents used to have them all in the house, but I couldn't find them last time, so I'm actually going to get hold of that one. A Wizard of Earthsea. Thank you for that, Paul.
The Wizard of
A Wizard of Earthsea.
Okay.
The Ursula Le Guin books that's been somehow on my radar for a while, but I've not managed to get a hold of. So that was a good cosmic nudge for that. Thank you for being the channel for that, Paul. What else have we got here? Indigenous Sense of Time from Rita here. A list of, as written by Mark Charles, the Navajo's perception of time. Value and importance. That's nice, isn't it? Value and importance is communicated not by starting or arriving on time, but by staying until the interaction is over or the task is complete.
As putting time instead of money is time on relationships, right? Staying in terms of in terms of commitments and relationships. In our hurry of time, how many things do we step over, right? We even step over our own selves in that hurry and frenzy of being on time comes to mind with that as well. So staying present, staying embodied.
Ji Yun asks, and I don't understand the concepts here, but she says, is dark time, light time in doppelganger other world? Do you familiar with kind of dark time, light time?
Is dark time, light time. Otherworld. Don't know that one. Yeah.
Gee, and I'm really sorry. We're really struggling to be able to respond constructively to your messages here. Yeah.
It was interesting. I chair or facilitate, I don't chair anything, a Power of 8 group. And we brought in this for 2 years, and it's a group of 7 women. And I brought in or an image was someone's photo was brought in. And so what we do is we show the person and the healing intention to the group. And then we all go silent for 7 minutes. And then we come back and we share what we see in terms of, is there really information that's reliable information that people can reliably access and from the invisible? No. And in this case, all 7 people saw it as spirit possession. The only time it's like, and the amount of congruence amongst the group in seeing the same thing in that silent time is probably 90% of the time people will agree in terms of a diagnosis, probabilities. Yeah. So it's powerful to be able to tap into that other world. Yeah. For self and for others. No, but as healers, we know that we can only go so far with our own selves in terms of drawing in that light energy and transmuting our own places where we're stuck is limited. Yeah.
Okay, Gion is explained, is it that there are dark energies there and light energies here? Well, if I've understood that correctly, Gion, meaning that is there dark light energies in one world, dark energies in another world? And certainly in my work with kind of healing places and organizations energetically, there's dark and light in the same kind of place, and both accessible through the same modality. So I'm not quite sure if I've understood it correctly, but I'd say that like the yin and the yang symbol, the dark and the light, they're kind of present with each other.
Do you see it, Peter, as in the phrase of as above, so below? So as long as we have this dark and light here within us and within our own psyche, then it's reasonable that that's the mirror.
Well, I certainly find when I'm doing that collective healing work, which I'm sure which individual healers often talk about, is that a project that I'm called to, has work to be done on it that reflects something that needs to be done on me as well. And so my process of, healing that system, which is normally the healing bit, apart from the life energy and stuff, is removing what we call Dor and Oronor, which is stressed and blocked energy from the system. That process always reflects some kind of healing in me that I wasn't conscious of needing before, but brings to the surface. And it's like, there is no boundary, if you take kind of Ken's book title at that point. So yeah, absolutely, fractal, as above, so below, etc. Yeah, as above, so below. Nice. Yeah. Okay, so we could continue talking about life, about light, about time indefinitely, says Shannon, for all time. So yeah. All right, well, can Paula share her contact info, please, as a request? It was on your slide, wasn't it? Is it Paula, Paula Petry dot?
Yeah, or maybe let me see if I have it here.
Drop it into the chat. Yeah.
Okay.
Angela. Every time I lost a loved one, it served to try to pull out my life purpose, but said to various generations. However, how would you position the case of motherhood? It's not got forever to conceive you over time. I think, Angela, my response to that would be there is linear time. No one, I think, is denying the fact of linear time, linear biological time in this material world. And that has rules to it. So, Newtonian physics applies to the physical world, but it doesn't apply to the quantum world or to the subtle world. They're very different laws of physics apply. And the problem is that our Western scientific mindset believes that the Newtonian is the only physics, because it can't see beyond the physical world, the material world. So, but doesn't mean those rules don't exist. So yeah, our biological clock, our ability to have children, our body's lifespan, etc., all still exist. But again, it's about our relationship to it, and not forgetting that it exists in the context also of this non-linear time dimension of the kind of universal field, or however we want to frame it. So that's important. It's not an either or. But somehow, in my experience anyway, it makes it easier to be in and navigate the linear time experience when I'm also connected to the non-linear, particularly in the sense of, this particular soul has incarnated in this linear experience for a reason, to learn something, and then afterwards it just goes back, and then whatever's next. So that's how I kind of make sense of it. But yeah, there's no denial of the linear time. But it's how we make the most of this linear time, isn't it? And from my experience, that's when we're not so worried about the linear time itself. That's when we actually, when we're not worried about dying and death and the kind of end point, then we really come back to life and make everything of the present moment.
Yes. Yes. That's very true. Yeah, I love that. It is. Yeah. So I had a big birthday, and it really, and at the same time, my mom passed away. She was very young when she had me. So it really, you talk about not letting death stalk you, as like you've been trained, you've heard that, right? As a phrase, as a, and then you think you're living that until you're not, right?
Yeah.
I mean, until you're not. And then it's time to contemplate. I'm writing about that now. I think it's so important to, that we help others, particularly the next generation, which is my work. As you know, Peter is translating all of this, and I have some new and couple projects on the, burner too, because the youth, can you imagine young people knowing this? Yeah, that are and living with this greater excitement and passion and understanding about themselves and possibilities, and experimenting with life in interesting ways, is all there in that.
Yeah.
But it comes with this around death, I think, is an important. Yeah.
Great. Well, maybe that's a good point to wrap it up. So thank you so much, Paula, and thanks everybody for your contributions. It's been hard to keep up with them all, but I hope we've managed to honor many of the comments and questions as they've come through. And of course, this isn't the end of the opportunity to continue the conversation, because there is the after chat. So Stan, in there there's the link to the after chat. I don't know if you're able to join, Paula, but I know people would really appreciate it if you can. And there you get to chat along with people, get to see them, and rather than just in the chat, they can you can all talk and interact. So great,
definitely.
thank you.
Yes,
and looking forward to really continuing this deep inquiry at Science and Consciousness in Broughton. I mean, couldn't really be a better place for it. If anybody wants to still check it out, there's the link, and the code to get a 20% discount is here for the program. So if you can make it to Broughton, beautiful place to go and contemplate these. And it'll be autumn, of course, so in terms of sinking into the things falling away, but also sitting next to these beautiful, great big fireplaces they have in the old hall on the estate. It's a real place for digging, for coming to stillness and dropping deep together into these topics. So I hope to see a number of you there, and looking forward to seeing you there. in person.
I can't wait. I can't wait. And I always offer special, value to people who work with me who are related, connected to Humanity Rising and the conference. So just everybody know that I really value the relationships and the people and what's been created here. So thank you so much, Peter, for inviting me, including me.
You're very welcome. Thanks for saying yes. Okay, bye everyone. Have a good weekend. And Humanity Rising back next week. I'm afraid I don't know what it's about, so I can't let you know, but I'm sure the emails will be whizzing around sometime soon. So you'll be able to see what's up next week. And for all the Jim fans, I'm sure he'll make a reappearance at some point next week too.
All right.
All right. Bye for now.